Where are we at for time?
It's already 10.
There's a lot that I can't show. So I was like,
Jacob, I got a thingy. The thing, you know, man, the thing. That's what it's called. All right. Time? 2 after. What thing? Take the button. Where you put it. Good. I'm not sure where he's going to stand. Probably here because it's got a remote clicker thing. How are we looking? Looking good? We good to go, Jenna? Are we live yet, Derek? We are live. Okay. All right, everybody. Thank you for showing up today to our Star Wars Day event. As you probably know, we call it Star Wars Day because it is what day? May the Force be with you. Sounds like May the 4th, right? And we're big fans of Star Wars here because we've had grads on every feature film, like in the last 20 years, on all of the live action TV shows Mandalorian, Andor, Boba Fett, Obi-Wan. So we're big fans of Star Wars here, and we're excited to have our guest today, who is a former ILM producer who kind of helped set up the technology of virtual production for The Mandalorian, and that process is now being used on just about every other TV show and movie that's out there. So we're really excited to introduce to you, and some of you already know, Mr. Jacob Oliver. Oh, you got it.
all right. Ooh, feedback. Okay, so a good amount of you probably have either seen me or have known of me. My class back there waving at me like they don't know me. Um, but yeah, so I am originally from Orlando, Florida. My name is Jacob Oliver. I am a husband, a father, and most importantly, a dungeon master. Um, let this sit for a second. Um, but yeah, so I teach. Thank you for taking a photo of this. I teach Game Block 4, so game studio, which is very much. I run it very much like a studio. So if you come into my class, be prepared to get a simulated version of working in a game studio. Um, I consider myself kind of a cinematic artist and a producer and a director. So currently, that's what I call myself, but that's not what I've called myself during most of my career. It's been either a cinematic artist or a technical producer, a technical artist, or whatever. As most of you know now, titles are very up in the air. What you're called versus what you do is ambiguous. It's always something different. But where I started was in motion capture. So I got a certificate from a school locally to be a motion capture technician and a 3D animator. So I studied for a year straight, and some of the instructors and I were talking about this over lunch, is I would have class from 7 a.m. to 3 p.m., and then I would go home and I would animate, or I would work on effects, or roto, or do something to enhance my skills. And so I did that for a really long time. So I did that for a year, and we were doing that every day and every weekend. It does feel longer than a year. But when I left, or towards the end of my time there, I was picked up by a company. Just got a laser pointer. This guy, the guy in the fedora, basically, he ran a he ran a studio, and he picked me up to do some animation work and some roto and that kind of stuff. And so my first job in industry was a movie called Hardcore Henry. Has anyone seen this absolutely absurd movie? Okay, I haven't. Fun fact about working in VFX and in games, a lot of times you either don't play the game or you don't actually see the full movie or the full episode. There's a part in this movie where he like breaks out of a cell or something like that, and I painted out the wires, I rotoed, did a bunch of grunt work, right? Which was awesome, because what that did is those 2 months of working on that movie got me onto another show directly right after that. So I worked on, has anyone heard of this show? Yes. Has anyone seen this show? All the way? Okay. So this was my first, like, not messing around, this is a big boy job. So it was a lot of modeling, a lot of animation, a lot of, let's hope it plays. A lot of stuff went into it. I was picked up for season 2. So you'll see a good amount of my work in this reel, which it's really weird to model something that's got a lot of Nazi symbols on it. And fun fact about working on shows that have Nazis is that you can make the equipment, you can buy the people to fabricate the stuff, but when the show's done, it must all be discarded. Legally, it has to be either burned or disintegrated in some form or fashion. So some of my work right here, you'll see most of these people in here are animations that I have done in some form or fashion. And the VFX students probably really like this, but I did put together one of these scenes. It's coming up right after, yeah, it's this one actually, right after this, right here. So all those animations, because those first 4 people are real, but everything else after that is fake. And so that caused, a bunch of mocap data, caused a bunch of animation, modeling, all this sort of stuff to make it look realistic. So that was my first job. Fun fact about this job is I was working on that scene that I just showed you, and I did not save my files correctly and corrupted a whole project file. And what that means is I lost about a week's worth of work. I see some of my students back there sweating. So I had to sleep under my desk because I was working that much. I wasn't married yet. I actually wasn't even dating anyone at the time. But I had a lot of work to recover, and it was pretty awful. But I learned the value of nomenclature, references, understanding folder structures across multiple different disciplinaries as far as VFX goes, and the importance of those. So we don't have to watch all of this, or I guess it's going to play the whole thing. There we go. So after that, I worked really hard. My fellow instructors are laughing at this because I worked really hard in my free time after that gig in Unreal. And so I put together a mocap reel and put all of that animation data into Unreal in Sequencer, and I made this kind of, right now I would call it super bad. It's really awful, but it was good enough to get the attention of the people at Epic, and I was picked up for the Paragon team, which is, if you haven't played the game, you can't anymore. It is no longer. I think the predecessor is literally called Predecessor. It was picked up by a couple of indie developers that got all the assets and is trying to remake the game. But some of the shots in here, I was in charge of. So this is all in Unreal. all this is was actually UE 23 or 24. Um, and each of these character assets are about 4 to 8 million polys. So the render time in Unreal was high, but it looks awesome. So there's a part where one of the characters is bringing down a giant stone, um, which is, I'm a big fan of this game because it looks amazing. It was a third-person MOBA. It's kind of like Smite, but you had all accesses. But this was my first gig. So every week, or every month, I'm sorry, in Paragon, a new character was released. And in that release, there was a cinematic trailer. So every month, we had to produce a whole new, brand new, from start to finish, character cinematic. And if any of you in VFX or in game understand, that is a big undertaking. Because that is, hey, we have this concept for this little guy who rides a dinosaur and shoots flames. And you're like, great. What do we do about that? So we would sit at a round table, all the cinematics team. We would pitch ideas to the director. He'd pick 2 or 3 of them. He'd say, write a treatment on that or a script if it's good enough. And then we'd start building assets right then and there. And so from there, we would go right from into pre-production right into previs. We'd start blocking out shots, which was my department. So I did a lot of previs, animation, and camera work. And then we would go to mocap stage, which was also my department. So I'd go to the mocap stage at Epic headquarters, and we would shoot whatever we needed as support. And then we would crank out a trailer in a month. And we did that for over a year. Inside of that, there is some downtime. So you get time to not play the trailer again. You get time to work on some other stuff. So during that time, Fortnite had been announced, but the base game hadn't even been released. And it had been in production for, someone can quote me, even though I worked at the damn studio, it was, I think, 8 years. Is this right? 8 years before it was released, it was in production, which is a stupidly long time for a game that isn't even, I don't even know. But anyway, so during that time, we got picked up to do, some of the cinematics artists got picked up to do screenshots. So basically marketing art for Twitter, for the YouTube thumbnails, all that kind of stuff. And so I got put on Fortnite to do promo art for it. And some of this you guys have probably seen, but this is my artwork. This isn't like, of course I had directors and leads, but this is me. I did these shots. So if you ever see any of these pieces of artwork on the website or anything, like, those are my hands on the keyboard and mouse. But Fortnite got released, and it didn't do well. It was pretty much like, hey, we're going to sweep this under the rug, really double down on Paragon. And so, super true story, which is always shocks everyone. Yeah. And everyone at Epic's headquarters was playing PUBG. Everyone know PUBG, right? We would go into work early, we'd play for an hour, we'd play for an hour at lunch, and we'd play for a couple hours afterward. Like, that's how obsessed we were. So the Unreal Tournament team, who was about 5 people, said, I want to make Fortnite, a version of this for Fortnite. So in 5.5 weeks, that's when we launched Fortnite Battle Royale. Just under 6 weeks. You had the base game release, and then, as everyone probably knows, the major success of Fortnite was wild. So what that did was create a bunch of necessity for cinematics. So I was on the cinematics team. So I did stuff like this. And this is a nod to what was going to be the Fortnite TV show, directed by a very popular director. But we did a bunch of these things. I mean, the cinematics team was like 30 people deep, 30 or 40 people sometimes. So we do little shorts like this. I'm sure a lot of you have seen the season pass trailers that are 1 minute, 2 minutes long. Worked on those too, but this is, short enough to show. But we did a bunch of stuff like this. So what happened was I started making a tool with another person where you could control the camera inside of Unreal with an iPad. So I started developing this tool. and it was used. This is the mocap stage for a lot of the Fortnite shorts and that kind of stuff. But because I had so much experience in motion capture, I was on the cinematics department, and I was in the animation slash mocap team. Let me back up. So I started working on some tools for myself, and that kind of kicked off into using a whole bunch of like interesting ideas. And then I got picked up by a team inside of Epic called the Special Projects team, because they liked the idea of using an iPad. They liked that I had the know-how to build that, and they saw potential in me to join the team to help create these new and emerging technologies inside of Unreal. So this photo on the left is the same day as the photo on the right. So I would get in around 8, 9. The workday at Epic doesn't start till 10. But I would get in at 8 or 9, and I'd be responding to emails that I missed overnight. This is just an FYI for those of you that either want to get into production or want to understand what it takes to run a very small team inside of Epic. My schedule is blocked off from 10 a.m. to do a mind meld, which is, I'm sure I don't have to explain that. Then Composure, which is the VFX tool inside of Unreal. And then I had lunch from 12 to 1, which is me responding to emails and going to the snack bar at the bottom of Epic's headquarters. Then I had something called Badger, Project Badger, which will now be known as the Mandalorian. But I had an engineering stand-up. Those of you that are in my class are familiar with what stand-ups are. This one happened at 1 because I had no other time. And then I actually had 1 hour of work time, meaning that throughout my day I had 1 hour, and that is from 1:30 to 2:30. Yeah, it's that bad sometimes. Zach and Trevor can both attest to this, that you're still expected to get your job done. They laugh because they know, but you're still, if you go into production or if you go into video games or VFX, you will have meetings, you'll have emails that you need to respond to, Slacks, Discords, calls, production meetings, stand-ups, those all eat into your day. You're still expected to meet your job requirements. So then at 2:30, I kicked off Special Projects, which is just all the producers of that team sit down, talk about the projects they're working on. Then I had scouting for the Fortnite TV show, which ultimately never happened. And that led into being going over by 45 minutes. So then I was late to my firesides, which are my one-on-ones. Then I had a Badgers production sync, which is the producers of Epic meet with the producers at ILM, and we come together talking about where we are at the project on each other's teams. And then we had, at that point I was double booked for Yak with one of the developers who tried to schedule a meeting with me. That didn't happen. And then I had a look dev meeting with the whole Yak team, because it's called Project Yak, and a progression sync with the virtual production or the virtual camera team. So these things happen. So this is just kind of one of those. My kids in my class call me Mr. Reality Check, I'm sure, because of the amount of reality checks that I give them. But this is one of those. Okay. So inside of that, even though I'm still expected to do my job, I get to do a bunch of really cool stuff. So this is a real-time image out of Unreal. This is not a photo. So this is the first ever real-time ray tracing demo. I partnered with Porsche, and we created this speedster concept car. And the spot was called Speed of Light. It was the, I guess, showpiece at SIGGRAPH when they announced the first ever ray tracing graphics cards. So if you've been following stuff since then, you've probably seen this. But that was my first, from beginning to end, production as a producer with Epic's Special Projects team. And this is my desk. For those of you that who like photos of desks, if you can see, I have two double shot espressos on the left. I've got a LaCroix on the right, and then I've got sequencer up, and this is me animating the camera for that spot that I was a producer on. So I was wearing 2 hats, and still, those are my days. I'm still expected to deliver at the end of the day my job. Like, I'm still expected to deliver shots. I'm still getting reviews. I'm still going through stuff. This is the tool that I was talking about. So this is a video I specifically took on my phone. Luckily, there's nothing crazy in there that I'm like not allowed to show. But if you want to see more kind of in-depth stuff, you can come talk to me, and I can show you other things that are not super covered in under NDA. Like I said, this is part of the tool that that we helped create. Does anyone know who that person is that we're following around in the screen? Anyone? Andy Serkis, yeah. So this was it was called Project Space Cobra, where I think they just released this technology like this past year, in tandem with the 3 lateral guys, where I don't remember the name of this project. We called it Project Space Cobra because we could capture his facial animation data and put it on any rig in Unreal that 3 lateral put out. Right now, that technology is called metahumans. So most of you probably know about that. But this is super cool to me. I don't know if everyone else likes this, but he's piloting a camera inside of Unreal using an iPad. Super fun. See if I can continue on. It'll let me. This is my mentor. His name is Tommy Jacob. Super good dude. This is a photo of Project Yak, where we were commissioned by Brad Bird, the director of Incredibles 2, to create a Unreal experience that would promote the movie. Well, maybe a month or 3 weeks before the movie came out, Brad Bird took a look at it and he said, absolutely not. And he shut the project down. That's to show you that you may work a really long time on something and it will never see the theaters. It will never reach the PlayStation platform. It will never go live. People may never see it. And that's unfortunate. That's the industry we chose to work in. The good thing is you're one, honing your skills as a artist, mostly, as a producer, or whatever it is that you're doing, and you'll made a ton of contacts that will then push you forward. So don't think that because your movie's not shown or your game's not completed or the contract gets pulled that you're not able to get something out of it. Some people are able to show the shots that they've made or show the levels they designed or the unfinished project kind of deal. But that was to show you kind of that could have been a really cool project to put my name to, but it just didn't. Literally just, he said no, and it was completely shut down. Like literally that afternoon, all the meetings that then on after were canceled. So in that same time, we were working on a project called, I don't know, there's so many code names. Just get used to code names. But it was ultimately called Star Wars Reflections. Does anyone know what I'm about to share with you? Okay. Well, this is behind the scenes. You'll see me without facial hair right in the beginning. Now I have facial hair. But this is a super cool idea. We partnered with ILM XLab. Who knows what ILM XLab is? Cool. So ILM XLab is a team inside of ILM that's very similar to special projects. They just make cool stuff, ultimately. They try to make new technologies. So what you're seeing in here is a mocap suit and a Vive headset all streaming into Unreal. So right now he's performing character number 2. And just before this, he did the performance of character number 1 in a sequencer shot. So he sat there and he did the performance of character number 1. We recorded it in sequencer. And then he stepped to the side, it's character number 2, and he acted off of the performance he did 30 seconds before that. Okay? And right after that, you get the final renders. So it was a very, very interesting technique in partnership with ILM. And they said, we can probably do more with this, right? They said, we can keep pushing this technology. At the same time, we're in talks with Jon Favreau, who's using Unity for Lion King. And we basically were like, don't do that. Hook us up. So from there, oh, this is the actual demo. This is real time. This is not pre-rendered. I played Captain Phasma. It's not my voice, but in motion capture and all that. And I can show you behind the scenes of me doing all that. But this is real time. This is using Unreal to create this. And we premiered this at SIGGRAPH Vancouver for the real time live. If I didn't know any better, I would think for like quite a few seconds, is this real or not? So this is good because the script used to be 2 minutes. There involved a potty joke. There was a whole bunch of janitorial nonsense. It was really fun. But that got them thinking about using the technology that I made, helped make, because it was a team of 2 people, to use it with upcoming projects. So remember I talked about using an iPad, right? Does anyone have any idea what they're looking at on the screen right there? What they're filming with an iPad virtual camera? Come on, somebody give me something. Previs for Mandalorian, right? So you can see in the cameras here, this is the opening shot for Mando. Does anyone know what ICVFX are? Shut up, Zach. Anyway, come on, anyone just take a guess. I will point someone out. What you got? In camera, very good. In camera VFX. Why is that a big deal? What? You do it live, right? Anyone know this movie? I promise this all has a point. It's not just a bunch of random nonsense. Yeah. Big Trouble in Little China. I like that movie, so I found this. Yeah. But the reason I chose this photo is because they're doing in-camera effects. So they're doing it with practical effects in the shot. So I want someone to think about this. You're on set. You've got everything lined up. You're the production designer. You've laid everything out. The director walks up. He gets the shot and he goes, let's flip everything. Let's face the opposite direction. What happens? Zach has a heart attack. What happens? Very annoying, she says. Yeah, so you're talking about a whole set reboot. You're talking hours of moving things, changing things, potentially resetting squibs, practical. I mean, it might even be like, scrap it, we'll come back tomorrow. Production designers and set designers are now working overnight to flip this whole thing. Why does in-camera VFX matter so much when you have this context? There it is. You can do that in a matter of seconds. You can flip the set completely. You have free reign. You've built the world. So that's what you did on Mando. Obviously, everyone knows Mandalorian. It's probably why some people here are even going to this school, right? So they thought about this and the use of the reflections and all this like virtual production technology that's been created. And they said, we have an idea. Let's start testing it. Excuse me. They had a very small wall. It was like 10 feet by 4 feet. And they were just testing getting a pre-rendered, a play blast out of Maya in there to see if it would even look good with a person in front of it and shooting a camera at it. So what I'm showing you here is I feel comfortable showing you, but for a long time this stuff was, I did not feel comfortable showing you. So these are very early shots of what is now known as like ICVFX or virtual production that was used on Mandalorian. Who knows that character there? Sonic, yeah. Yeah, one of my students is super obsessed with Sonic. So what you're seeing right now, aside from seeing some really weird stormtroopers in the back, you're seeing a camera that is filming a TV with a garbage mat around it, or a small projected green screen. And so we're tracking the camera with a Vive puck and the character here with a Vive puck. So what we're doing is we're gathering the information where the character's at, basically where the TV or the LED wall's at, or where the camera's at. And we're creating the parallax inside of Unreal to be projected onto the screen that's behind the character. Now, sometimes it's easier to still key things, so you can still project a green screen behind them. You just map whatever size you want it to be. But you'll keep the surrounding LED wall to light them correctly, as opposed to getting a bunch of green spill. VFX students probably know what I'm talking about right now. Is you'll have to then, it's a nightmare. But that goes from this to that. Super simple technology, an idea, scaled massively, right? So 75 feet across, I think 21 and a half feet tall is what we ended up going with, and 170, 165 degree LED wall, or 300 something, almost a full circle, with a full Vicon or a full OptiTrack system tracking all the data in there. So I went from working in a little tiny place where I had to sleep under my desk because I messed up some files, to I'm now looking at one of the coolest things I've ever seen in my entire life. So obviously the super inspirational thing is if I can do it, you can do it too. But it took a lot of hard work. I was not here, but I was at school working. I went home and worked. My wife is watching this right now. She would tell you that we were dating at the time. But I came home and I worked until 10 o'clock at night, and then I went to school the next day, worked, and then just kept practicing on the animation, effects, all that stuff. And ultimately, it allowed me to be smart enough to work on this stuff, or have the skills to do it. So that's kind of my inspirational side. Does anyone know this guy's name? I did not know him as Grogu, because he didn't have a name when we were doing pre-production. This was his name. We called him Gizmo, because we didn't know. They didn't come up with a name until season 2, or the end of season 1. So I basically helped them create this technology. We pushed it forward. We gave it over to a bunch of developers and VFX artists at ILM, and they shot a whole season on it. They had 3 different walls. They had smaller one for kind of in-person stuff, or like really tight shots that were not filled with a bunch of stuff, and then gigantic, huge volumes. They're called volumes if you didn't know. For the bigger stuff, for fight scenes, well, not really fight scenes because you don't want any practical effects coming off the weapons and destroying an LED wall. That has happened, I'm sure, and I just don't want to hear about it. But anyone have any questions? Because that's pretty much all I have to say. So, because the technical questions that you guys ask, I can answer, but I don't know what they are. So I just want to open it up. Or any questions about my career? Yes.
With the Sonic figure and the LED on the screen, it's really cool how you got that idea with just the amount of simple things you tried to put together.
Yep.
big your final product in your brain, but start off so small.
Sure. So this is what's called an MVP, or a minimum viable product. So it was a bunch of. So her question is, how did we be able to come up with the idea, start this small with the vision of this? And that is that we had the idea for like what this could be, and then talks with ILM, and we're like, wouldn't it be cool with this, and wouldn't it be cool if we could do that, and then we'll, anything that the actor touches will be real, but anything like 6 feet past the volume will be all LED. And we're like, okay, let's get this down first. And everyone in my game production class will know that an MVP is where you start. You get the minimum viable product. You get the thing that you want ultimately, you get that working first. If it's a spaceship, if the game is a spaceship that flies and shoots things, get a spaceship that flies. It doesn't have to look pretty. It can be a cube, as long as it flies and as long as it shoots, right? My students are laughing, but it's true. This is how you work. So this is a direct example of that being like, we're going to figure it out. A lot of troubleshooting goes through like, okay, you need to be camera mapping, where you are mapping the focal length, the camera itself, the intricacies of what the cameras are doing. The lenses all have like different distortion on the ends, and all that needs to be mapped so that when you go on a virtual production set, that frustum is correct. It's projected the correct way. So this is us testing, like, can we get camera data? Can we project a screen in Unreal to follow camera data? And we found out, okay, we can. So the next level of that is testing with a bigger TV and not tracking the character, but just tracking the camera in a volume. And then from there, you just keep building, you keep iterating, and all of a sudden, you get that. Yes?
So for like you just let one fashion backdrop, but decided to make it screen instead of.
That's a TV. That's a big TV in the back.
Yeah, you went with the backdrop like before, like 1980s kind of backdrop where you created all the S screen and stuff. But instead of just having a plain background, you guys used the screen to make the background.
Yeah, that's it. That's so what she was saying is that basically instead of like creating a still image, we created a live set that we had just tracked with the camera. Anyone else? Yes.
So how exactly, I know even newer TVs nowadays, when you try and record them with any kind of video device, I don't know if it's because of the lower refresh rate, but you see like lines that are like moving across. Were you like using some special TVs, or did you like have to figure that out?
For this test specifically, this is just an OLED like Samsung. It's nothing special. But you do have to worry about the refresh rate when you get something like that, because it needs to match whatever your graphics card is doing. And you do need very high-end graphics cards to produce this. Like, I think the Genius Bar that we made for the initial test of Mando was close to 100 computers. I know because I wrapped them in cellophane myself. That's not a joke. There's a story about James Cameron in that, and come find me at some point and we'll tell you about it. So yeah, you just got to worry about refresh rate. Because with the LED wall, you use something called in-display that makes sure that everything is mapped correctly and that everything is it knows that you're projecting to an LED wall, so it has certain software built into that specifically for that. And at that time we hired a developing company in Switzerland to help develop the tools that would integrate into Unreal. Anyone? Anyone else? Did that answer your question, by the way?
Yeah.
Okay. Mike.
Our students who are in virtual production may be very interested in the kind of jobs that are like on set for these kind of productions. What sort of things would you tell them that they should be doing now that could contribute to that sort of part of their career going forward?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So for those of you that didn't hear it, is what kind of preparation can virtual production students be making now so they can potentially get a job on set? Right? How many of you are in virtual production right now? Raise your hand. Woo, that's a lot. So this is a very interesting conversation for you guys. Okay. I would say a lot of it is it's a weird blend of visual effects, understanding the core concept of visual effects from a traditional standpoint, and then it's understanding Unreal's tools for virtual production, which abstracting that just a little bit, it would be understanding blueprints, environment art, and real-time technologies. That's a broad term, but what I mean is being able to produce real-time content at a reliable frame rate. So if you have a huge scene that's got 15 million polygons and one single rock that's on the ground, like, is that optimized? No. So you need to understand optimization, you need to understand real-time technology, and understand how a set functions. And granted, virtual production sets operate slightly different because you have to worry about mocap being tracked, you have to worry about cameras, there's like layers of details that go past just regular, like, hey, sound speeding, everyone shut up, we're about to record. I'd say there are tools in Unreal right now that you can mess around with to understand the technology of setting up a virtual production stage that you don't need anything for. But understanding the things like what's a garbage mat, what's a keyer, how do you get real reflections on a giant metallic suit on a guy who hunts people. Like, understanding that you then have to like either recreate that suit in 3D and then add light on top of it in Nuke or Houdini or whatever it is. Understanding those concepts and how they work, how the workflow goes, will greatly impact your skills for virtual production stage, because those things translate directly into Unreal. This is kind of in the weeds, I guess, but it's a weird mix of the two. But learning how to troubleshoot, understanding what real-time technologies are, understanding what camera workflow is in virtual production, which you can read up on, and then a basic understanding of traditional VFX, which we are learning. So, anyone else? Yes.
Kind of mixture of film and on-set virtual production. Can you break down the set? How different is how much of, I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of wires and technology, but when you break down the set, obviously you have separation, everything that needs to go away. How different is it within LED and all that?
So how different is it breaking down a set?
Yeah, we're not, when I mean breaking down, I'm not talking about animation, I'm talking about film.
Oh yeah. So there's what's called a VAD. The term is called a VAD. It's a virtual art department. So that team is in tandem with pre-production, building out the 3D environments that will be used as the set pieces for the stage or the volume. So the workflow is actually like, who was here for Diana when she spoke? Most of you, right? The same workflow that she was talking about, where it's way less linear and most of the stages can be working in tandem, is the exact same is my answer. Because real-time technologies allows you to make changes on the fly, but you have to be making those assets to begin with in the virtual art department.
Yeah, but what about the physical objects? Is there a lot less of them?
There are a lot less. So set designers are still employed, obviously, but the rule of thumb is if a character is going to touch it, it's real life.
So you're breaking it all down. Obviously, you have all the light and everything to break down, but how much of how much of the ground is real? How long would you say it takes compared to the old traditional like 40
Uh, so if you're using a volume that's already been made, so our question is like setting up the production versus setting up the production of virtual production versus traditional production. What's the difference, right? Is that kind of your question, time-wise? Production design, like, I mean, Zach can attest to traditional production, building sets, getting a sound stage, those going through design, then art checks, and then you have production like lead designers who are checking everything. A lot of stuff that's practical. That stuff, it takes a long time. It takes months, potentially a month or two to build a set for a couple scenes. Where like it might take one person 2 months to build 18 scenes in virtual production. But building the on-site stuff, it's about the same, but where the time saving happens is, you guys know Pedro Pascal plays Mando, right? Who was I talking to about this yesterday? Someone over here? Yeah, that he was in the suit sometimes, but he wasn't in it all the time. So and ILM had 3 stages, so we can set it up so scene 15B, which takes place on one planet, with Pedro Pascal's stunt double, is being filmed on stage A. Then the hero shot of Pedro Pascal taking his helmet off and being saved from AT-AT is being shot on stage B. And then on stage C, we have another guy playing, what's his name? What's Mando's real name? Din Djarin, right? It's only been set up for space, so it's got his spaceship in there, and it's on rockers, and it's the LED wall is nothing but space. So all 3 of those sets, A, B, and C, all 3 of those volumes are rolling all day. So they're filming 3 scenes, potentially 3 pages to 5 pages a day, which is astronomical. Because Mando, it's kind of different because you can then have step-ins, but like another benefit to that is on volume A, you can have your heroes, your unit 1, then unit 2 can be prepping volume B and volume C, so that all they got to do is walk on. Yes.
What about so say you take an older show or old episode, you want some, I guess, old, they just stayed set. They're on the platform, they stayed set. So now instead of having the platform, having take it from say the set, you know, 3D back.
Yep.
And just bring it up in the
Yeah, and you'll have to build the inside the volume, inside the assets inside the volume, but yeah, it's a lot less work. Anyone else? Zach?
Well, I just want to say something that's really interesting about what you're talking about, right? Like having multiple things going at the same time, but like the amount of work and effort that goes into shooting practically. Like, so we're filming in a desert planet. So to practically have an actual scout to then shoot like in the desert somewhere, it's not just like, cool, we're out in the desert, we're shooting this. It's like, well, how are we getting electric out here? Where are the restrooms? Where are facilities? Where are we setting up craft? Where are we doing all of this? Once we're done with that shot, now it's like, cool, now we got to go to an interior. All that has to get broken down, picked up, and transferred.
How many helicopters do I got to
Yeah,
rent to?
And so for this was really cool. Is even if you had to redo the set deck or set decoration and everything on all the actual stuff that's going on inside the volume, you could still literally use the same volume and transition to a totally different. Like we did an interior, like you guys did. Well, ILM did interiors, like during that whole scene where he's like, "I want the baby," whatever.
Yeah.
That's an interior shot, and then you could literally transition to now we're on a planet somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
You could do that in the same volume, the same day.
Yeah.
Not even just having multiple, but literally the same, without having to worry about facilities,
Yeah.
electric, all of that.
It's all on the same soundstage.
Wild.
And then you can roll out the literal sound stages, the foot high stages. You can just roll them out. You separate the LED wall and you roll that out and slide in a new one like a cartridge. Yes.
How did it work with all lights?
So some lights would be put in the scene, meaning like in Unreal you would add a spotlight. Same. Like LED. I mean you crank the air down.
Were you guys not putting your
Sometimes. I mean most. Yeah. So LEDs are fractionally less heat than traditional like tungsten lights. And having 100 computers at the Genius Bar also doesn't help. But you have really good ventilation. We had huge air conditioning units, fans that would kick on in between sets. So yeah, I mean, it did get hot, but like, you know, there are working conditions and working standards that need to be met while on a film set. So like those things are taken into consideration when building that soundstage. Aiden.
Actually, working on set live, so to speak. Is it kind of how they show it in the Unreal Engine demos that they do, where they just literally drag stuff and add for the
Yeah.
request?
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if there was a specific job that was basically the person who assembled that scene, had to look it over, worked on tweaking it, changing the lighting.
So that person would work for the VAD.
Work with that.
Yeah, that person works in the VAD, the virtual art department. VAD, virtual art department, the VAD. VAD.
So they're just taking pre-made assets and just placing them.
Not pre-made.
Or are they making them?
For shows like this. Yep. Anyone else? Who thought this was cool? Yes.
So they're a lot more post-production than pre-production. They're less post-production than pre-production now.
I wouldn't say there's less. I mean, you can get final pixel out of this. What I mean by final pixel is what they shot on the volume and on the stage is what will be shown in the film or the show. It doesn't happen often, and it's getting better and better. But what's most important here is it makes post-production's life so much easier. And Zach can attest to this too. Is you're not having to you're not having to rework lighting. You're not having to do a whole bunch of other stuff because the lighting can be produced like in Unreal. I can take this area and I can just put a giant or square in there with a light that's emanating from it. Like put the emissive material on there. And I've got a light that's now going to hit his helmet, and it's not a real light. When the LED wall, it's a real light. And there are lights that come into play and practicality wise that you'll actually bring in if you need something like a bounce light that's directly underneath the talent. Yeah. Cool. Aiden.
Another way basically adding lighting, that will affect things without actually having a visible object that's lighting. That doesn't translate over to the actual set. So if you were to have something like that.
It does. Yeah.
So it's still the light without actually showing anything.
Yeah, because it's still the same data, and as long as you angle it correctly and have the right material on there, it will produce light coming out of that LED wall. Yes.
What about the reflections though?
What about reflections?
I mean, when you're shooting like that, you're gonna have obviously the screen, but you're gonna have everything else around it too because it's live. So
That's the point. Is
so
yeah.
when people behind him, you'll see that they're reflecting. How do you get the blue light?
So that's if it appears on his armor, that's taken out in post. But that would be taken out whether you're on an LED wall or not.
The beauty is that you're getting the virtual environment's natural reflections
And
on
lighting.
a suit like this. That would be a nightmare for every single shot if they weren't doing this because you have to then map in all of your virtual environment as reflections on the actual suit post, which would not be fun.
You guys remember the like the silver shiny ball that you'd see behind the scenes? Yeah, yeah. This is not fully replacing that. Like you still capture that data, but that's what this is doing in real time. Does that make sense?
Fairly well, yeah.
Yeah.
Getting really close.
Yeah.
All I was gonna say, the only downside of that would be this is why I think it makes a lot of easier. It's like, God forbid you have a director on a show. This happened on Strange New Worlds when they use the volume.
Yeah.
Like, you know what? I really like that they use the volume, so everything outside of their little, they had like a kind of like a dining area or whatnot, right? Not to get into a different
Star World.
But like if they're like, oh, you know what? I don't like this ship in the background. Now that's a problem because now you have to roto everything in front of them because you don't have the luxury greaser. But it's minor. Like,
Yeah.
The benefits are way better.
Yeah.
That's the only time where it can be
Yeah.
For the most part, it's awesome. Saves a lot of work.
Why don't they just have ships instead of boats? I mean, yeah, boats.
Because it's an afterthought.
Yeah, because the director decided after it was shot, which that happens. Yeah. Any other questions? Thoughts? Cool. Everyone liked it? Come talk to me after. Yeah. Well, thank you guys. I think that's it. That's it. That's all I got. If you have any more questions, come grab me. I can share some other behind the scenes photos and videos that I can't share here. What you got?